gladly pay you by the hour for a minute or so, so you can sign off on the towers where they'll piss on your home. And if you feel like you're just powerless to answer them no, it's 'cause you are. They'll gladly pay you by the hour for a minute or so, so you can sign off on the towers where they'll piss on your home. And if you feel like you're just powerless to answer them no, it's 'cause you are. It's 'cause you are. They'll gladly stagnate a living wage, snap the chains and bury it. Labor slaves in rusty cages dragged behind a chariot, led by Mr. Racial Jungle, Joseph R. Iscariot, fighting over scraps as they barrage us all with variants and BuzzFeed clickbait, straight until we're paralyzed, trying to distract us from the concentration camps that Joe had swore he'd close but only chose to amplify, where they got 50-something kids in cages made for 5 to occupy. And no, she hasn't seen the camps, but Harris swears they're paradise. She tells us the facilities are safe, and that right down to the women, they are regularly sterilized. Then she throws her head back and she proceeds to laugh, that sort of heartless cackle you'd expect from someone working steadfastly on behalf of the virus and a Congress full of parasites. And where was I? I was busy cashing every blue check, demonstrating plainly all the narratives expected from the verified. I was busy breeding verbal leeches by the terabyte. Train them to exsanguinate the wealthy while they sleep at night. Bleed the oil barons dry and barren, say they showed us how to share and now we share alike. Tell them I contracted rabies from a feral mic. Now I'm just another species losing sleep to noise pollution and these glaring lights, forced to change its habits and adapt to just survive. But now it's safe to say that some of us are thriving in the moment, throwing shit on presidential homes beneath the Paris skies. So if you feel like you're just powerless, I guess you bought the lie. But I can tell they're petrified of our collective might, 'cause I can hear those gentrifiers weeping at the sight of our collective rights. And I only can imagine the intensifying fear of knowing revolution's near, and all that's left to do is simply wallow in the thick anticipation of a rabid bite. And baby, one day you can ask your leaders just what that was like before you grab a slice. So if you think you're powerless, allow me now to change your mind. Honey, if you think you're powerless, allow me now to change your mind. See, they'll pay you hourly, tax them each apart, and build a shining tower out of loopholes and cards, and tell you that you're powerless to keep you in the dark because you aren't, because we aren't. You see, they'll pay you hourly, tax them each apart, and make you build a shining tower out of loopholes and cards, where they'll tell you that you're powerless to keep you in the dark because you aren't, because we aren't.
If you thought you saw your freedom, it was truly a mirage. Freedom's locked a cell away from Julian Assange. Our First Amendment rights are by his side behind bars, and the next voices silenced will be ours. Rest assured, democracy is rotting in the dark. Rest assured, we vilified dissenters, pushed out black renters, and tore down their housing just to build a little urban park. God, I tell you, old America really knows how to leave its mark. Blaze a trail, leave 100 scars. Rip your free speech out your throat, demonize the man who told you it was so, and leave him freezing in a cell in Belmarsh. Perpetually awaiting extradition. Thrown to the wolves of claustrophobia and malnutrition. And all that we can hope is that we catch Uncle Joe in a fleeting lucid moment of his flickering senile fascist mission. That maybe we could trick him into thinking Julian is just some sweet blonde middle school Christian, and she got mixed up with a few bad apples, slapped with some charges, and thrown into prison. Joe would set him free without a moment's hesitation under one condition: that he can sniff her hair before she goes back to school and he goes back to business. But if Joe's just had his shots, then we haven't got a chance of getting past his black and white vision, getting past his gut reaction to appease all of his donors' sick requests and shape policy and law around corporate mandated decisions. So really, all along, I think Julian was one man standing in a tempest with the fearlessness of true conviction. And if his is the only conviction we see after he shed a light on this country's most poisonous schemes all come to fruition, and we all collectively stare at the ground because we felt like our hands were too tied beyond signing petitions, while he's tortured to death for attempting to warn and enlighten admittedly not quite the brightest of citizens, and half of this country just won't take the time to uncover the truth, or they just don't mind, so they're quick to dismiss it and say it's a difficult position. Then we're back to the comfort of centrist delusion. We're right back to sleep for those ignorant sheep who resisted themselves into one protracted contusion, twisting themselves into knots to correct all your stimulus check-based confusion, wrapping their necks around their backs as they justify overflow migrant detention or fracking pollution. Then Kamala laughs, and the camera pans down to her shoes. And that footage is 90% of your 6 o'clock news. Except for a feel-good story about a man who at 95 years young just made Employee of the Month at Whole Foods. And the $50 gift card means this month he'll afford his prescriptions and meals, and he won't have to choose. This is the machine that a man named Julian Assange threw his body on the gears of for you. So to cry out for his freedom is the least that we can do. Now best believe the feds will serve to muddy up the truth, but rest assured the temperature in Belmarsh is an icy 22, and Julian is shivering in a solitary room without a view. Rest assured Obama loves a whistleblower just about as much as he loves weddings where he doesn't get to detonate the groom. Rest assured Obama bought the plot where all our First Amendment rights are gonna rot and demanded that they carve his smiling likeness on the tomb. So that when you come to pay respects to your free speech rights and a somber feeling hits you and you look up to the sky, the answer will be staring you right in the eyes to the questions of why and of who. So if you thought you saw your freedom, then they wanted you to. Human rights are mutable, and Julian is proof. Our First Amendment rights are stuck in...
False alarm. I thought that help was here. But it was my own reassurance bouncing around 100,000 times in my own ecosphere. If every time you speak you keep it off the record, consequently you can keep your record clear. And if you mute the speech that shakes your frail beliefs, you only seek to insulate your image and continue down the stream in the direction clout and credit steers. Directly from your mouth into am I the asshole Reddit's ears. Directly back into the greasy pockets of some Gates Foundation financiers. And then directly back into the frantic final thoughts of early trial Neuralink volunteers, staring at the numb and mumbling vacancies where recently had been their peers. Half of whom are glitching with the memory stuck on pause, and half have zero fucking clue just who they are or why they're here. It's been said that fear is all we have to fear, but that was back before the Bezos fear condenser came along, distilling concentrated fear that's diamond pure, crystal clear, oppressor strong, and woven into every single article you read and song they let you hear. And then Elon heard that Jeff enhanced our fears by 86%, and he said, hold my beer. And not a single sheep among the herd would turn their head or say a word, cause they were all too busy begging for the shears, begging for the muzzle, happy just to guzzle, feed, and watch a screen for all their years. Man, to each his own, can't afford a home, but they'll let you have your cozy little ecosphere. Where there among your own devices you can break the seventh seal, overthrow the oracles and slay the seer. All the tomes were burned and all the lips were seared. Shut your eyes and all our lives just disappear. Now blink 'em twice. Welcome to your ecosphere.
I think I liked it better being blind, when I couldn't read between the lines, and when I couldn't see the cracks in the structure that lay bare before me the whole time. I think I liked it better back when I suspended disbelief and swallowed pride. I thought I knew the difference in the red from the blue, but they both bleed us so dry. They both bleed us so dry.
My favorite songs don't hit the same way. I get to the end of a 4-minute track and I'm only looking back thinking, what did they actually say? So I try to sit down with my wife and watch TV, but I just see propaganda elevating the police in the simplest of sitcom banter, and tiny little altars full of offerings to corporate masters in every well-planned wide pan shot of the name brand stocking up the pantry. Pull back one long tracking shot out to the garage to the logo on the Camry. Nice tight shot of the Camry. Close-up view of the Camry, slow pan up on the Camry, long slow zoom to the unmoving human who's up in the front with the tube pumping fumes to him straight from the back of the Camry. Ashamed he just could not provide for himself, let alone for his family. It's a blue pill mindset that spent 2020 making dance beats.
I think I liked it better being blind, when I couldn't read between the lines, and when I couldn't see the cracks in the structure that lay bare before me the whole time. I think I liked it better back when I suspended disbelief and swallowed pride, and thought I knew the difference in the red from the blue, but they both bleed us so dry. They both bleed us so dry.
Ignorance is bliss, which explains why a lot of us are so fucking happy. Quick to take the trip for all its trappings. Never one to ask what's up, what's going on, or God forbid what's happening. A lot of us would strap into the ride and then spit right in the eye of the guy whose job it is to snap your fastenings. But maybe we're all born with that capacity. Maybe each of us comes standard with humor, compassion, malice, and audacity. Some of us are blind to the system, but some see it fine and say this is how it has to be. Some of us can stare wide-eyed at a nationwide human catastrophe and only offer platitudes and recipes. And I wish that I could tell myself that nothing's worth obsessing past my everyday necessities. I wish that I could cry fake news over anything that threatened me, tune out our abuses and consume a little levity. Wish that I could offer up my son a smoother destiny. Wish I had some better lessons for how best to answer questions for the things I've been perpetually questioning. But I'm too busy looking at our leaders, wondering what I might be missing from their messaging.
trying to find the reasoning to let 250,000 people meet an early reckoning. And even though I know the truth, it's hard to swallow something that's so literally sickening. Hope is ever dwindling, COVID ever beckoning. Winter slows your breathing, but your pulse is ever quickening.
Who are these people?
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Iron and News. I almost did that seamlessly this time. Watch me not have changed the 3 people names for when I have a presentation, you know, but I can do that right now.
Seems fine to me.
Yeah, you just don't see it yet.
It's fine.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it's actually like good.
Yes, I didn't mean those
Congrats,
names.
Reef.
Congrats. I meant.
Oh, in the
presentation screen. Yeah.
presentation mode.
Yep. Presentation mode, but those are fixed. So, anyway, how are you guys, fam? You all doing okay? Got the people in the chat,
You know, it's a hump day. It's hump day.
right? Everyone's trying to get over that hump, pretty much, too, from what it seems like.
Hump day's already like basically over.
Yeah, unless you're on like West Coast, and then it's like, what time is it West Coast? Like 7 right now.
Now we're on bump day.
Yeah. We got some new people in the chat. Madmon Anon, welcome.
Mad Mom and on.
Jimmy's in the chat. You can have the chat up here. Anyway, we're here with Iron and member Greg, otherwise known as the
Hey,
BigMadCrab, and my lovely co-host Collin, as always, at Obana _Collin, OGBONNA_Collin. People should know how to spell Collin. You would think.
I spell it with two L's, so
2 L's, double L.
double L.
Yep. So we do have some stories this evening. I'm just trying to remember if there's anything we should cover before doing that. Anything you can remember, Collin?
We'll probably won't announce it maybe toward the end, but those of you who are in the DC area or able to get to the DC area this weekend, marches for Medicare for All are happening on Saturday.
Nice.
I forgot specifically where they'll be, in the vicinity of Capitol Hill, if I remember correctly. I could pull it up later for people who are interested, but yeah.
Right.
I think at minimum, if you follow the March of Medicare for All Twitter feed, they'll give more information about that.
Yeah, I saw CJ retweeting it and all that fun stuff. So
yeah, but I think even if you're not able to go, a small donation just to kind of help with the expenses that they've needed as far as porta potties, having speakers come in, disability stuff for speakers who are disabled, all that stuff costs mucho money.
Yeah.
So if you're not able to go,
putting this together, she did a really good job.
Joy and Ricky been killing it.
Joy Marie.
So, but anyway, you have a story for us, I think. First off, Collin, correct?
I sure
pull
do.
it up. Which I had to F11 this before I do, and then we go here. Cool.
Mitch Schwartzer Cummings says, how many progressive politicians will show up for that? I think Marianne Williams is actually going. Is that true?
Maybe.
I heard a rumor that that's a possibility.
Yeah.
By possibility, do you mean like she said yes and then she's like not going to? Or...
Well, she spoke last year. So
okay.
Given I know Savage Joy is very close with Marianne, I'm pretty certain that she will make an appearance on Saturdays.
Ghost Art said Neo Khanna said he'd tweet it out.
We're
so
actually
which
going to talk about
leads us into our first story. So
They'll send a strongly worded letter.
the lovely Savvy Sabs did an interview with Mr. Khanna. When was that? Yesterday? Day before yesterday?
Yeah. She did it, I believe, on Monday, but she premiered it yesterday. So I won't.
Which I don't know why didn't she do it live? Do you know?
I thought she did.
Idea. No, she didn't.
No, she pre-recorded it and then premiered it.
Yeah,
smart.
And I'm wondering if that was like on Khanna's side. He doesn't want to be live or something.
I would imagine. Imagine he didn't want it live.
Could be savvy too, not wanting to deal with trolls and chat.
Probably too. But yeah, I mean, it's Khanna. You're gonna get, if those of you who saw it, it's Khanna. So if you want to lose a couple of brain cells watching the interview, or at least just to show Savvy some support, watch it. But I mean, there's nothing really of substance that I could really say about it. But I did want to highlight something that I think, speaking of the marches for Medicare for All, like Khanna did a little oopsie. In terms of something that he said about it, and obviously knowing Savage Joy and Ricky knowing a little bit more about it, that those, if you do not know, like, you may not have been able to catch it, but I was able to mention it on stream yesterday and kind of followed up with on Twitter yesterday. So like I said, I'm not going to spare you guys with playing the whole clip, but oh, what happened?
Did it work, or does it just not play?
It's not playing for me.
Have to ask in reference to healthcare in this country, because a lot of the squad members ran on Medicare for All. We had marches in this country last year in over 50 cities for Medicare for All. There's another march this Saturday that's going to be in DC, the Medicare for All March. And I have to tell you, I have been greatly disappointed to see that some of the same politicians that ran on that issue chose not only to not attend those marches, but not even to tweet about it. Cori Bush was the only one that came. And as an organizer, like, it's really frustrating when you hear politicians tell you to organize on the outside, and we're organizing on those issues that they ran on, and they're not showing up. So at this point, some of us are asking, like, why should we even support them going forward?
Well, I'm a strong supporter of Medicare for All. I think we have to be bold in having hearings on it and supporting Bernie Sanders' bill. It's good for America. I mean, it's good for our businesses. It's good for manufacturing. It's necessary, if ever, in a pandemic. I mean, the stories you hear of people still getting stuck with bills and debt for going to the hospital, for getting healthcare are outrageous. And we ought to cancel medical debt in this country. Now, I think we need a better system of making sure those of us who are strongly pro-Medicare for All are aware of the activism and the marches. And I'd be happy to show up in the future, especially if they're in my district or in Washington, to those kind of marches. I met with a group, Medicare for All group, that is doing great work, and they wanted me to work on canceling medical debt. And I reached out to Senator Sanders. We're working on a bill to cancel that, about $290 billion of medical debt. But I am all for continuing to build and organize on that, and just need to figure out how do we get a better sense of communication so we know about the marches and can show up.
Well, I can tell you, I contacted multiple politicians, like offices. A lot of us did, and we were given the same story. At least I did for my state, for Massachusetts. I can't speak for your state, California, but we were given the same stories that, okay, we'll pass this message along, and then we never heard anything back. And I know that people can't be there all the time at every event. I totally get it, but I feel like they could have at least tweeted about it in some type of.
Was the march in DC?
Yeah, there was one in DC last year, and there's one in DC this Saturday.
This past Saturday?
This Saturday coming up. July.
He doesn't
1st.
even know.
The challenge also is that
He's like, when was it
Congress
again?
is out of session. So I think when they do these marches, we're
That's
back in our
crazy.
district. So I think they have to pick a date also that members of Congress or during votes or when Congress is in session, because a lot of times then when Congress is not in session on a weekend or in August, then members should be going back home, and so they come back home to our districts. But I am for these marches, and I would be delighted and happy to participate, and certainly to tweet out about anything that supports Medicare for all.
Yeah.
Let's get it straight off the bat. The tweet part is that's the best we're gonna get. There's
Right.
nothing more.
We'll tweet about it.
I'll give it a tweet. That's about it though. I can't really.
I can boop a button. That's what I can do.
Yeah, and I mean show that tweet because it's so like bland and like nonchalant. It's like, I support this march on Saturday for Medicare for all.
I broke Khanna and I support this message of stuff that won't happen right now because of me. Anyway.
But here's the thing though. So like, if you want to pull up the next slide, Reef.
Yep.
Like I'm not sure if you could see it here, but in the chat, I was like, someone tell Joy and Ricky that Khanna forgot about the marches.
Right.
And there's a reason for that, because if you turn to the next slide, you will see that this happened, I think, back in April.
Yes,
So
I remember
Ricky-
this tweet.
So Ricky and Savage Joy met with Khanna at Capitol Hill. And just to read what on the tweet, it says, "We are appreciative that Khanna invited us to meet him with DC to discuss national improved Medicare for all. Among our concerns is medical debt. Rep. Khanna told us he will reach out to Senator Sanders about collaborating on legislation to cancel medical debt."
Savvy said his team made the decision for it to be recorded, and it had also rescheduled twice that day. So just a little bit of information for you.
You really didn't want to do it. That's why.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
No. Yeah. So then fortunately, this was from yesterday. Savage Joy, I guess upon watching Khanna on this stream, tweeted out to him in response, "Khanna, just watched you on Savvy and deeply disappointed by your response to Marches for Medicare for All 14 minutes in. We are the same people who met with you and convinced you to do a bill with Bernie Sanders on medical debt cancellation and doing the march. You already knew about our march because, one..."
Sorry.
It's all right. "Your assistant asked us to Zoom with him 2 weeks ago to give him more info and say you'll be stopping by. I told him we were not having any candidates or reps to speak, but everyone is welcome to come. He then said you will be stopping by. Furthermore, we will never organize a march around," I think she said around Congress's schedule. "Have a march on a weekday. Also, the importance of Saturday, it is the anniversary of Medicare. Our organization does not revolve around electoral politics. We're about helping humanity. We, the people, are claiming our voices. It is of no consequence of reps show up or not." So that's what she responded. And then Roe responded back to her with this: "Respect and admire your march, but I am back in the district when you are marching. We'll show up for future..."
When was it again?
Right.
What?
Right. "We'll show up to future marches when I'm in DC for sure."
I didn't see this.
So
But he's
to
back-
which,
Okay, so he's gotcha. Right. He's like, I gotta wash my hair that weekend.
Right.
Oh man, I gotta feed my cat. Sorry.
I gotta feed my cat. I gotta get a cat first. But you know,
I was actually going cat shopping that day, that very day.
so
I
the
already
next
scheduled it
slide,
out.
yep.
Sorry.
so seeing all of this,
Good for you.
I responded
Good for
with this:
you, Savage.
"You lying sack of shit. You knew about the marches, but you have no interest in attending because you are afraid of the implications regarding your future career plans in government. Even if you were not coming, a tweet of support prior to this weekend would be meaningful.
Little golf clap for that one. You know, like
tweet harder.
Yeah, pretty much. I'll tweet about it.
I'll give it a tweet. I'll give it a tweet.
So then, so then March Madness Raw, we will accept a tweet.
Yeah, pay up.
That's all you're gonna get.
Well, to which Ro responded to that.
Happy to tweet out.
Happy to tweet out. DM me the details. And apparently, Greg, you saw just now.
He tweeted it out like 20 hours ago.
He tweeted it out.
He did tweet it out. He did just. I sent the link in chat.
Yeah.
He literally just like, I support this.
Right.
And
then I just added this tweet. A tweet would be the consolation because we definitely have the receipts.
So I'll pull it.
Yeah.
Here.
So, I mean, again, are we surprised at this? No. But is this really shady? Sure. But I think especially, and I think knowing Ricky and Savage Joy and knowing that they spoke with Ro Khanna personally in Capitol Hill, you know, the fact that I was able to remember that and being able to kind of say, I'm sure they told you about the marches back in the spring when they met with you. And then he was just kind of like, oh, I didn't know about it. Was it this weekend? And all that kind of stuff. It was just kind of like...
When was it again?
Right.
He didn't tweet this out, by the way. His intern did.
Yes.
Well, yeah, whatever. But, you know, like...
That's why it's so poorly worded. Like, I support this. We need Medicare for all right now.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean... So... I mean, shout out to Savvy. I know she's in the chat for doing this interview because, like I said, you know, you had the patience of a saint because I cannot have imagined doing that interview for more than 5 minutes without, like, basically yelling at him. But
I do admire that a lot.
Yeah.
Like, Savvy, you got like you push back, but like in the most effective way possible.
Right.
It's about like.
Yeah, I mean, but like I said, it's just, and the thing is, like, I know this, and I know this because I heard Joyce say this. I'm not sure if it was Ro, but I definitely know it was some other members of the squad. This has happened before. You know, she has met with, it was either Ro, like maybe about a few years ago. I think it was Ro.
Yeah.
And I want to say it probably was, who else did she meet with? Jayapal, and talk to them personally about her issues regarding medical bills, regarding the need for Medicare for all. And you know, and they just gave her the lip service stand of being like, oh, you know, we will do something, you know, like, and all that kind of stuff. And so the fact that, so knowing all of that, because Joy mentioned it, like when I went to the Force to Vote rally a couple of years ago, that's when I first met Joy in person, and she mentioned that, you know, when she was speaking that. So the fact that like Ro, so this is not the first time she has met with Ro Khanna, but the idea like he just actively just basically gave no fucks in terms of like the issue that he and the squad ran on.
Right.
You know, it's just really sick. And so it's just kind of like,
well, and from all the interviews I've seen of him, like I've always got the opinion that you know, it's just straight like obfuscation, like don't really ever answer a question, just constantly avoid stuff, and then like the interview's over.
Right.
Like, you
which
know,
he did that whole interview.
Yeah.
So, you know, so yeah, so I mean, Jimmy's like, his district is Silicon Valley. So yeah, so obviously we know that he's tied to corporate interests. We are suspecting right now that he's probably trying to say the right stuff, just so like not in 2024, but probably in 2028, he can make a presidential run. So I think he's just being very careful so as to kind of give the appearance of, oh yeah, I'm a progressive, but still tied to corporate interests that, you know, that could probably help him, you know, in terms of, you know, if he does choose to run for a higher office. But I don't know, like this, but at the end of the day, like I said, I just feel bad for people, you know, like Joy, especially, who, not to say that she's looking necessarily for them to actually do something, but the idea, like, and it's not just her, but the idea that for many of us, if we ever meet these politicians and we basically bare our souls to them with the issues that we're struggling with, and we're looking to them to say, you know, like, help us in some way to know, like, to give us hope, and they don't give that to people. I think it's just really like, it's just really saddening to me that, you know, you just take our stories and basically you're just like, for your convenience in terms of us voting for you, and then once you're in office, you don't do anything with that. So
yeah. No, crazy. Anyway, we decided to bring Crab on today for our next story, since he so like actually wrote it himself, which I love someone doing work. That's always nice. You
That's
know?
always great.
It's always great when someone else, it's like when someone else makes your sandwich, it's like guaranteed 60% better tasting if someone else makes it than if you made it.
And I don't even really do this either. I mean, I mostly make art for INN.
Right.
I make music and like,
yeah,
like
those of you
stuff.
who are behind, those of you who, you know, like know us now, you like the thumbnails that you see on Jesse Jet's American Tradition. Greg does those. The thumbnails that
how did we miss that?
Greg does those, as well as how we. So Greg is, you know, like works behind the scenes, but this is your first Substack article, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't like. I was gonna say, like, I don't really like write things, but like because this is like kind of like directly affected my country. Like I'm from, well, not like from second generation Croatian. My parents are from there. They're actually there right now, and they can already see the impacts of how low energy supply and just the general Ukraine war and everything going on over there is not only affecting a recession in the United States, but it's actually even worse in Europe. And that's why you kind of see like a lot of these like protests rising up, like Belgium, France, etc. And this was just kind of like talking about how the euro exchange rates, single currency economics is kind of like a way to put the cost of inflation on working class people instead of governments, who can easily take on the debt if they wanted to. But
so recent developments on Tuesday, which was last Tuesday, pretty much.
That was like 2 Tuesdays ago, man. Yeah, that was like 2 weeks ago.
EU finance ministers gave Croatia the final green light to adopt the euro single currency on January the 1st. Bulgaria is the next country in line to join the euro and has stated its willingness to adopt it as of January the 1st, 2024. EU Commission Executive Vice President Valdis Dombrovskis insists that joining the euro will bring tangible economic benefits for Croatia. He further adds that using the euro will make it easier and more attractive to invest in your country. It will lower barriers for businesses and remove currency exchange costs. However, many Croatians, such as myself, are apprehensive about the euro's arrival. Many anticipate that prices will go up, especially since businesses will have to round up prices when converting from the Croatian kuna. Right?
Prices are already bad.
With the war in Ukraine, several countries are now making the move to take part in the globalized neoliberal project, such as Finland and Sweden joining NATO, as well as more and more European nations taking part in the Eurozone's central banking system. In the onset of several European crises throughout the 20th and 21st century, the political response by EU powers has only been the radicalization of neoliberal integration. Instead of tackling the fundamental problem of distribution between labor and capital by creating any sort of sustainable structure for the EU economy, the prevailing view on European integration, namely that more market freedom is always better, has always been considered prosperity enhancing and would lead to an increase in efficiency. Despite these reforms, though, the enforcement of an EU single market has not led to economic growth since the 1970s and instead has weakened growth on a worldwide scale. As a second-generation Croatian, which you are, Greg, I would like to examine and demonstrate the introduction of a single currency as a key factor in the advancement of neoliberalism and colonialism throughout the European continent. Through instruments of capitalism such as debt, neoliberalism has evolved into a political agenda that replaces democratic control over economic policy with a system of economic management ruled by elites. The Eurocentric narratives of development throughout history can seen only to endorse technocratic despotism, financial deregulation, the destruction of democracy, and the debasement of wage earners into a new proletariat regime within the modern world. Yet, discussions of the course of the Euro's integration cannot be approached merely as a timeline of events. Instead, it is important to understand why certain events occurred, who the driving forces were, and what impact they had. So,
and one thing I wish I did mention in this article, but I didn't really dive into too much, was the theory of MMT. And I know, like, I spoke to Collin, I DM'd Collin a little bit about this, about Stephanie Kelton's book. The name is losing me. But MMT theory, about the idea that money is not like a normal household. It's much more like if you were to play like World of Warcraft or RuneScape, like where you could literally just go in the back end and just type in a bunch of zeros.
Yeah,
you can make that money. Money is not like, especially like when you talk about fiat currency, like the definition of fiat is literally that it's not based off of anything.
Right.
So these you'll get to it here, but like you can see like a pattern throughout the 20th and 21st centuries where we could have easily avoided these financial crises. Like it's similar to what happened in 2008 here, by having the government take on more debt. But we have this idea of debt bad, surplus good, which is just simply not the case. Not in our current economy.
Makes sense. So the introduction of European integration. In fact, the initial attempts at European integration were met with great success. The 1950s and 1960s were characterized by an economic boom, and peace prevailed among the European states. These experiences led to a certain degree of willingness on capital to compromise with employees, thereby avoiding the escalation of conflicts and the associated negative consequences. So, yes, when capitalism works, it has to work for the people. Pretty much is what you're saying. Next slide. There we go. In the 1930s, a new development model emerged in the United States as part of the New Deal aimed at increasing wages and providing social welfare. This showed that such an approach was compatible with dynamic capitalistic development and high profit growth. As a result, the quality of life was able to improve rapidly for many people. The focus on industrial development during the 1930s can best be understood in light of the global economic recession of that time and the rise of extremist political movements such as the far right in Europe. The consequences of this internal struggle were tragically realized when Adolf Hitler's election to power in Germany and the outbreak of World War II. So, by the 1970s, there was a dramatic decrease in the scale of economic growth. The policy of high interest rates was introduced by the U.S. in 1979, creating a major crisis in Europe relatively soon afterward. In view of the fixed exchange rate system and liberalized capital markets, monetary policy could not stabilize the economy as a whole, but merely stabilized the exchange rate. Unemployment rose rapidly, but instead of persisting with capital controls on capital movement, European leaders took the opposite route, right? So, yeah, I mean, pretty much capitalism as it was running caused those things.
This is all starting with Reagan. I mean, we can kind of see the beginnings here, and like really like a lot of this article is kind of just diving into the history of where this came from. But you can kind of see the European market is merely a United States creation. It's basically a secondary economy dependent entirely on us.
That makes sense. So, and it's pretty much, we took advantage of the crisis, right? And, that like the Marshall Plan, stuff like that, helping integrate a lot of that. So, as a key victorious power of the Second World War, the United States was anxious to establish functional capitalist structures in Western Europe. Concrete measures included the Marshall Plan and the establishment of a stable international financial order. The Bretton Woods system, within it, post-war Europe was crafted to remove trade barriers between European neighbors, as well as foster commerce between those countries and America. In addition to helping to reconstruct Europe, one of the stated goals of the Marshall Plan was to halt the spread of communism on the continent. The plan is also considered a key factor in the formation of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It's also worth noting that the Central Intelligence Agency received 5% of the funds allocated under the Marshall Plan. These funds were then used to establish front businesses in several European countries, some of which were designed to further American interests, and others that may have had even more nefarious purposes. The CIA had financed an anti-communist insurgency in Ukraine, which was a Soviet satellite state at the time. Interesting enough how that parallels some stuff now.
You could see right after World War II, Europe was in the midst of destruction, and you can kind of see where this is headed. The Marshall Plan, quote unquote, was supposed to help Europe rebuild its economy, but instead it was really just a matter of us trying to stop communism as much as possible.
Right.
Because
the
idea was to have like a more communal based economy, but the United States can't have that because we're king capitalist over here.
So, as Chomsky once described, the extension of the Marshall Plan aid in countries like France and Italy was strictly contingent on exclusion of communists, including major elements of the anti-fascist resistance and labor. From the government, democracy in the usual sense, U.S. aid was critically important in early years for suffering people in Europe and was therefore a powerful lever of control. A matter of much significance for U.S. business interests and longer-term planning, the fear in Washington was that the communist left would emerge victorious in Italy and France without massive financial assistance. So, in Activism's Munich series, Re-Examining History, an interview with Noam Chomsky further reveals the United States' effort to establish an economic world order and restore radical conservative policy to create a massive U.S.-dependent economy and destroy any and all social reform or anti-fascist resistance, offer in favor of Nazi and fascist collaborators. Most of the Marshall Plan money actually was transferred from one bank to another. In the United States, there was a big problem at that time, a major problem of industrial overproduction. The U.S. had a big service of industrial production, and the world just didn't have markets. The world was virtually devastated by the war, so part of the attempt to create markets for U.S. excess production, ensuring that the former colonial areas would provide dollars to Europe so they could purchase U.S. industrial production called triangular trade programs. Another was the Marshall Plan, which did provide funding to purchase American exports. In the course of it, Europe did develop, incidentally, I think, about probably $2 billion of the $13 billion went for oil imports. That was part of the U.S. effort to turn Europe into an oil-dependent economy. The United States controlled the oil. Europe had coal, not oil. Same in Japan. They tried to turn them into oil-dependent economies. The reason that was expressed clearly by George Kennan was that if we did that, we would have what we called veto power over their policies, because we would essentially control the energy spigots. So,
and you can kind of see this crisis like taking place right now with the
with the gas and stuff, and
it's important to note that Europe is not. You would think it has its own separate economy, its own separate idealized nation, but no, that's not the case. Europe's entire economy is entirely dependent on exports to the U.S. So that means that without the United States, Europe's economy would essentially fall. And that's why you can see a lot of parallels between our economy and theirs, is because ever since World War II, they are entirely dependent on us.
Gotcha. So the 1990s saw the introduction of further integration measures in accordance with the neoliberal approach. The abandonment of fixed exchange rates in 1992 paved the way for the introduction of the euro. The collapse of the European monetary system and the idea that a single currency would help to curb Germany's influence also led many unions to advocate for its adoption. However, many expected that a neoliberal institutional structure would be put in place to administrate it. As it turned out, this is exactly what happened. Deregulation continued apace in Europe, increased continued apace. Gotcha. Yeah. The consequences has been the suppression of wages and redistribution of wealth from wage earners to capitalists. In Germany, wages declined in real terms for a long period, mainly to Agenda 2010 and the Hartz reforms. Although declining wages usually result in demand problems and stagnation, it was possible in this case to prevent this. The neoliberal institutional structure of the euro turned out to be functional in this regard. It allowed Germany to maintain large export surpluses at the expense of the European periphery. So you continue. The economic crisis in Europe can be attributed to the fact that the capital flowed out of countries that were dependent on exports. This was due to speculation against government bonds, which then turned into capital outflows. These affected euro area member states most severely because the neoliberal European Central Bank wasn't intended to act as a lender of last resort for them. Instead, bailouts and other similar measures were drafted at the European level to prevent the complete collapse of the monetary union. However, these did not benefit the countries in the periphery, but mainly functioned in the interests of banks and other creditors in the core member states, essentially socializing the financial sector. The costs were borne by countries such as Greece and Spain, who were forced to introduce austerity policies, which have led to dramatic cuts in wages and benefits for their citizens. At the same time, labor markets have been liberalized to favor employers over employees and have reduced competition for jobs. So
they had like a super 2008. Like Obama,
right.
You know how he responded to the financial crisis. He bailed out all the banks. Europe did the same exact thing, except this affects, since they're all bonded by one single currency, this affects workers on an entire continent scale.
Gotcha.
You're having costs borne on countries like Greece, like I mentioned here, Greece and Spain, who are entirely dependent on the European central economy, and they're not bailing these countries out; they're giving it to the banks.
Yeah.
So the costs are essentially borne on wage earners and workers who have to basically sacrifice benefits and pay and jobs in order to essentially just socialize the banking system. Socialism for the rich.
Pretty much. As always. Yeah. So you have some takeaways a little bit. So the European monetary integration has taken away the ability of nations to devalue their currency in a time of economic turmoil. This has led to a conservative package of austerity measures being put into place, essentially what conservative economists have recommended since the 1930s. The policy response has been orthodox packages of austerity and downward pressure on wages. These measures have intensified social conflict in Europe and still haven't addressed the root causes of economic decline. The reluctance of the European Commission and ECB to utilize labor flexibility is indicative of their class bias. Moreover, this rigid approach has been integral to the EU's policy package in the face of macroeconomic volatility, right? The euro area, that still gets me, does not have many options when it comes to policy when faced with external shocks. Other than wage adjustments, there are little to no solutions left. It's not your fault, it's just words. You know, English language is terrible.
Euro area.
The euro area. Like, it's like, that's, I feel like Anchorman doing like the vocal exercises, you know? Yeah. So European integration has not been an entirely linear process. In fact, its history is rather complex, primarily because the Union has undergone a number of different forms and implementations throughout its existence, mainly in the favor of capital markets and conservative economic policy. As demonstrated, the neoliberal variant is not the only possible form of economic and political integration, but rather one of a number of possibilities. The stubborn implementation of this neoliberal form of integration was both the result of social class struggles throughout history and an answer to the burgeoning market crashes at that time. It occurred mainly at the expense of wage earners, while capitalists repeated the benefits. The European periphery was institutionalized at the EU level, with new and even more neoliberal rules derived from the initial ad hoc measures. These rules were thought to result in a brighter future for the people living there, but instead have resulted in a loss of democracy and are authoritarian in nature. As such, economic devastation was not solved in favor of capital. Capital profited from it. In particular, capitalists took advantage of the crisis to push through radicalized neoliberal forms of integration in Europe. This has already led to violent reactions from workers in the periphery, right? And you put this little video of...
I linked a tweet to the France protests that happened fairly recently. That's why I kind of wish I mentioned MMT a little bit more, because it's showing that, like, how even within our current economy we can have it's entirely possible with fiat currency to have the economy benefit us, but instead we've used a number of excuses throughout the past 2 centuries in response to a crisis to instead push neoliberal reforms even more, like our response in 2008.
Right.
Essentially just having capitalists more and more powerful throughout time. And it's just getting worse and worse. Prices are getting bad.
Makes sense. Yeah, I mean, they're controlling all the resources too. So, like, anything you're trying to buy is inflated, right? Because they want more money.
And inflation is not entirely in their control. That's more of like the supply of currency. But what they can do is have
stuff about inflation, that it's not necessarily go ahead.
It's more of like a contradiction of neoliberalism.
I feel you. So the problems of the neoliberal economic policy and European integration have never been more apparent, yet more and more countries are joining the EU single market, further weakening the economic growth of these countries at the expense of wage earners and the working class. As a result, contradictions of neoliberalism, as well as the economic conditions of the EU, are only getting worse and worse as time goes on. And I think that's the end of your article, right?
Yeah,
that's it. You see protests in France. They're actually burning shit down. They have a radically different response than what the U.S. has had the past couple decades.
Well, I think partially because Europe is in and of itself a much more populated, like more densely populated to me than like America is, just because of the size of the country we have, right? Like there's a lot of space in general.
No.
Whereas like
no, I would argue no. I think you might. I think maybe in terms of surface area, you might think so, but
yeah,
I would argue that like
it does have to do a lot with culture, though, too.
Yeah,
just the way that we treat politics and how it's kind of like politics is almost like entertainment here in the United States. Over there, they like take it pretty. I mean, even in countries outside of Europe and the West in general, you would see Sri Lanka. Their response to economic turmoil and lower quality of life is radically different than what the U.S. can ever even imagine at this point in time.
Johnny Axam, the point is that there is no fiscal constraint on how the EU can spend. It's all political, just like in the U.S. The euro makes it worse for each country. Yeah, because then they all have to like be on board, right?
And there's this whole Western idea. I mean, you could see that's why I mentioned the Finland and Sweden joining NATO. I think like this Ukraine war crisis kind of is just like pushing more and more countries towards the West.
Yeah,
and it's really just a death trap because there's supposed economic benefits supposed to be good for the economy, but really it just fucks you over in the long run. It makes you entirely dependent on the United States.
Right. So last week, me and Collin covered a little bit of the continued story of, Christian Smalls and his adventures, and talked about.
It needs to be a children's show.
I mean,
Yes.
it wasn't necessarily about Chris Smalls. It's just
No. He showed up at an event that the AFT was holding.
Very shit-libby, basically.
Yes, the American Federation of which I just saw recently. He's got a thing with Bernie Sanders, like old Bernie is throwing a party, I think, and he's showing up. So that'll be interesting to see how that goes. I'm sure there'll be some interesting speeches from that. But we have a bit of a continuation of that story about that AFT, correct, Collin?
Yes.
Okay. So this is from WSWS, right? And the American Federation of Teachers Convention in service of Americans, capitalism, COVID-19 cover-up, strike suppression, and war plans, which we covered essentially a lot of the measures that they had voted on last week.
Right. So
one of them including
goes into a little bit more specifics and the hypocrisy that you could find in each of those.
Cool. I love Pacifics.
Resolutions that we kind of talked about a little bit last week, but this will go into a few of them more in depth.
So the American Federation of Teachers, the AFT, concluded its biannual convention on July 17th. The event held in Boston was characterized by a cover-up of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, support for U.S. imperialism's war against Russia, and an overall deepening of the union's integration with the capitalist state. It serves as a warning of the role that the union will play in suppressing the working class as the crisis of capitalism intensifies. Randi Weingarten, president of the AFT, set the tone for the event in her keynote address. Other high-profile speakers expressed the close collaboration between the capitalist state and the teachers union. They included First Lady Jill Biden, Labor Secretary Marty Walsh, Senator Elizabeth Warren, and AFL-CIO President Liz Schuler. Their speeches revealed the nervousness of the union bureaucracy and Biden administration about containing the growing movement of the working class and confining it into a dead-end Democratic Party voting campaign. The speakers list also included ALU President Christian Smalls, the new darling of the AFL-CIO, which has embraced him in an effort to shore up its waning credibility. Do you see how they're writing about you? Sorry. You're the darling of the AFL-CIO, bro. You're like the class pet. Like.
No, but I think we said this. I think we said this in our Discord earlier today. I'm not gonna. He's basically a mascot.
Yes.
Basically,
now,
in terms of
right. He's the union mascot, essentially.
Right.
Like they might get a Christian Smalls mascot any day now, and start using it.
Or we're gonna have like tax to rich Christian Smalls t-shirts. We're gonna have like little Christian Smalls bobbleheads. They're going to sell it on both.
I'm sure that's coming. That's coming.
I'll buy one. I'll do it up.
You'll see it in Walmart's, Target.
I'll get a big cardboard cutout, put it back here. So
tax the rich.
They also talked about the COVID-19 pandemic. Weingarten acknowledged in her speech the unprecedented crisis facing educators and the American democracy as a whole, citing the pandemic, the January 6th coup attempt, the war in Ukraine, and the Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade. She asked for a moment of silence for those who have lost. What took their lives and how many were lost, she did not say. In fact, thousands of educators and school workers have died from COVID-19 since school reopened in August 2020. According to an unofficial tracker, no official tally has been released by either the AFT or the Teachers Union. The NEA, which also held its convention this month, over 14 million children have been infected and at least 17,000 have died, according to the CDC. The vast majority of infections and deaths occurred after September 2021, when children and educators were forced back into classrooms during the Delta and then Omicron waves. This policy was demanded by the Biden administration and ruthlessly enforced by the AFT. So, whitewashing her own culpability in the deadly school reopening campaign, Weingarten said that during the pandemic, our members rolled up our sleeves to make in-person learning safe and welcoming. The AFT embarked on an unprecedented back-to-school for all campaign last summer, giving $5 million in grants to 1,800 AFT affiliates, serving some 20 million students. It was Weingarten herself who boasted that she spent 15 hours a day coercing educators and parents to return to unsafe classrooms. The AFT rank-and-file memberships, meanwhile, raged a concerted struggle to keep schools known to be central locations of viral transmission remote. Weingarten's admission to visiting 150K work sites in the last 14 months is telling. Throughout January and February, thousands of educators and students staged walkouts in dozens of cities. Many of these were wildcat, organized independently or in defiance of the unions. In places where the unions were forced to call a temporary strike, they immediately sought to stifle and sabotage the struggle of teachers. Collin, you're a teacher. Thoughts so far?
Sure. I mean, yeah, because I wasn't even, this was way before the network was even founded. But yeah, this was such a huge deal really into the summer through last fall in terms of teachers and families feeling very unsafe to return to school because, like that time, we were going through Delta. A lot of the issues that teachers were sharing were not necessarily addressed in terms of, certain schools may not have windows that would open, so to ventilate air. Like some schools that may, have been more renovated within the last 10 to 20 years, the HVAC units may not be working correctly. Actually, in my school, our HVAC units were not working for the first maybe 2 weeks of school. So they had to install like these big ass AC units, like the floor ones, and install those in the classrooms, so while they tried to get the HVAC systems fixed. But yeah, I mean, like, I think it was just, and I think even in my district, they trying to give the guys of, we have to return to school, amount of learning loss and all this kind of stuff. But there was no one necessarily addressed the idea of how unsafe teachers and some families felt, especially for children, who may have health issues about returning to school. But I think it was just in the guise of, okay, we have the vaccine, and at that point, children like of a certain age were able to get vaccinated. So go in and everything's back to normal. And I think I've said this a lot, like the idea of this past school year, they tried to make everything back to normal, but giving us twice the workload to kind of catch up, but also kind of see where the holes might be as far as children's learning, right. Was ridiculous. And then, but ultimately, I don't know the numbers, but I think I've definitely within the last couple of years have been more teachers who've been either retiring or leaving the profession in record numbers. So I think it just kind of makes sense that we're hearing from the people at the top, that you have to go back. Whereas on the ground, especially for teachers and families and students, there were concerns that were not necessarily addressed. So, yeah. I mean, it makes sense that, the EFT tried to cover this up, saying, oh, everything's all good, when that wasn't necessarily the case. And then,
Homo style.
Yeah. And I mean, a lot of teachers unions, they have no power. Teachers have no power. Like in my district, I can't strike. I can't protest.
Really?
No.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, you guys can't go on strike. Is there a teachers?
It's because of the teachers union. Yeah.
Yes.
Like my mother would have the same problem. You can't go on strike without consent from them if you're in the union.
Right.
Which most teachers join a lot of teachers join. I don't know the statistics for educators who are and aren't in it, but you know.
Would you say the majority of districts in America are like drastically underfunded?
Absolutely.
It's-
Yeah.
What, schools?
Yeah.
The majority of like their education.
Oh
system.
God, yeah. Because
Absolutely. Across the
like,
board, public school
yeah,
for sure.
That's what happens when public schools are funded by property taxes. So obviously for me, I work in more of an affluent area of DC. So like I basically work in the area where there's a lot of, in my case, a lot of politicians and world bankers and all that kind of stuff. So like
yeah.
they're
It's
more
funded well
well-to-do
there.
versus like even my neighborhood, which is right now where I live right now, is a little bit more gentrified, but you know, but to the east of me, you know, is more low income. And so
Right.
not many of those families are necessarily owning their homes, they're renting.
Yeah.
So, you know, so the idea that schools are funded basically essentially by your neighborhood and the economic value of your neighborhood really puts a strain, especially for low income schools or low income neighborhoods, of the resources that or the things that they're able to do in those schools.
Mm.
You know, I would argue in not many of those schools, they probably need more help, but again, you know, that's affected by, you know, property taxes. So, which, you know, in those areas are next to none, given that there's not many families that are owning anything in those neighborhoods.
And speaking of public schools, during her speech, Weingarten criticized the extremists, the anti-public schools crowd, the anti-union crowd, the privatizers, the haters. This begs the question, why did the AFT collaborate with these very extremists to promote school reopenings? In late September 2021, as the Delta wave was raging and adult and pediatric hospitals filled up across the country, Weingarten hosted a town hall event in partnership with far-right anti-public school parent groups Open Schools USA, which featured notorious pseudoscientist Dr. J. Bhattacharya and author of the Great Barrington Declaration, anti-mask COVID minimizer Tracy Beth Hoag. I love the framing from the WSWS here. You know, sometimes they're just terrible. But so it is noteworthy. Zordon, it's okay. It is noteworthy that the AFT convention required. I'm busy. I know there's putties in the park. I'll worry about it later. Required proof of vaccination, masks, as well as multiple negative COVID-19 tests for entry. None of these basic, though inadequate, measures are guaranteed to the millions of educators and school children in the U.S. over the past 6 months. The Biden administration has overseen the full dismantling of all mitigation measures, testing, and reporting infrastructure. Most of the major school districts opening in the coming weeks will not even require masks, despite a huge surge of the BA variant, which the administration had projected could infect 100 million people this fall, indicative of the vast chasm between the concerns of educators and the priorities of the union. Of the 36 resolutions adopted at the convention, not a single one was devoted to the pandemic. To the extent that the pandemic was even mentioned in the resolutions, no concrete measures were proposed to protect educators or students. So they also talked about the war in Ukraine. While no resolution was passed on the pandemic, the AFT did pass a resolution giving full-throated support to the U.S.-NATO proxy war against Russia. In her speech, Weingarten, who supported the CIA-backed coup in Ukraine in 2014, denounced Russian President Vladimir Putin as an oil gangster, but raised no criticism regarding Biden's meeting with Saudi Arabia's blood-drenched despot, Mohammed bin Salman. The resolution reeks...
pipeline, right?
Yes.
What?
He wants to be an oil gangster.
Yes.
Sure.
The resolution reeks of imperialist lies and hypocrisy, in addition to covering up the well-documented role of neo-Nazis and fascists within the Ukrainian state and military. It accuses Russian forces of war crimes while ignoring evidence of war crimes on the part of the Ukrainian military. The resolution goes on to claim that the AFT affirms the fundamental principle that aggression should not be the answer to conflict among nations. Where was this peace-loving principle and the respect for sovereignty and democracy during the last 30 years as the U.S. waged endless wars in the Middle East and North Africa? Past AFT resolutions endorse U.S. imperialism's aggressive war against Afghanistan and Iraq. including one resolution from 2003 that fully embraced the lies of the Bush administration, demanding Iraqi President Saddam Hussein abandon weapons of mass destruction or else face unavoidable military conflict. So, a good batting average for the AFT in lighting up behind the Biden administration's promotion of this proxy war in Ukraine. The AFT seeks to pull a veil over the eyes of its membership as to the existential dangers the conflict poses. It did not mention that the escalation or the conflict fueled by the Biden administration threatens to spiral into a nuclear third world war, which threatens the annihilation of humanity. It supports the sanctions against Russia that have led to an international food crisis for billions of people, while assertively stating that U.S. has avoided direct U.S. military involvement, ignoring unprecedented levels of military assistance, including tens of billions of dollars in high-tech weaponry that will be paid for out of the pockets of American educators and the broader working class. That's yo taxes, people. That be yo taxes. Although the MMT people would just say that they're printing money for that, which they are doing both.
They essentially are.
Yeah.
It's socialism for the rich.
E. Heller said in the chat, has the AFT made a declaration about the need for nationalized comprehensive universal health care for the U.S. yet? Nope.
No. What they did
that
mention
would be nice, though,
was the AFT's policies in relation to the pandemic and the war against Russia are dictated by the fact that the union, like the entire AFL-CIO, has become an appendage of American capitalism and specifically the Democratic Party. In concluding her speech, Weingarten spoke about the ongoing danger posed to American democracy in aftermath of the January 6th coup attempt, stating, "We may have seen our last free and fair election." She continued, "If this isn't a 10-alarm fire, I don't know what is." This is the most important last free election of your lifetime.
9/11.
Right.
Whoever wrote this, I forgot who wrote this article, but I think it's a woman, but she had fun with this.
Lois from Family Guy wrote this speech, though. I'm going to tell you right now. This is like straight up 9/11 and yay. That's funny. We may have seen our last free and fair election. If this isn't a 10-alarm fire, I don't know what is. We have one shot at changing this. Her only answer, however, is to vote for the Democratic Party harder. A party that continues to call the Republicans colleagues and has refused to arrest and prosecute Trump or his wide network of collaborators. So fun.
I love how they're entertaining this idea that they're gonna arrest Trump in some sort of way. I really, it's kind of entertaining.
Oh, well, stuff
there's
is
this belief system. Where they've kind of hijacked the word democracy.
It's the beginning of the end. Haven't you heard?
Wait, that you can't hijack a word that it doesn't exist in this country.
Yeah, true. But Collin, it's a label, and you know how I feel about those. I take all the labels off all my stuff at the house. Like, you're not allowed to know what shit is. What's in that can? You don't know. Finally,
it's just a word in this country. It's basically just a definition of something that doesn't exist.
Yeah,
it's kind of supercalifragilistic. It's just a word.
Right.
It's a dictionary definition.
To imagine that any electoral option at this point is going to save you,
Andrew Yang just announced they're starting a new party of
former Republicans and Democrats with him as a chair. Yeah, the Forward Party, and I agree, he's a loser.
Forward to destruction.
Yeah. So finally, the speech by Chris Smalls, whose ALU won a rare organizing victory at an Amazon warehouse in Staten Island, won so far, right? Just the one? Okay. Just wanted to make sure I got my numbers right for his baseball card.
You got one out of...
So New York sought to cultivate illusions in the union apparatus in the capitalist system. Smalls vaguely referred to a war going on outside and the other side is winning. If he were honest, he would say there is a class war going on between the capitalists and the workers, and that the capitalists are supported by the so-called labor unions and every other political organization that seek to bind the working class to the Democratic Party. Smalls asked the crowd to envision the following fantastical scenario. Imagine if Liz Schuler told the AFL-CIO, if Randy said, you know what, teachers don't go to work today. Imagine if everybody in the country, all unions, came together if we all withheld our labor. They've had this power from the get. When are they going to use it?
Again, the idea that teachers unions cannot necessarily do that.
Yeah.
So
Who
there
put that
is a
rule
pro-
in place?
there is a problem. And
Why are
Um,
unions stopping workers from organizing?
Because they
Why
want
is that a
control of the actions.
Well,
Because
yeah.
that's essentially like, they've wrote tons of treaties and stuff along company lines, and you never know what things they've signed there. You know?
That's kind of crazy. That's like a bakery shop, like have no cupcakes whatsoever.
Yeah.
No cupcake rule.
Right.
But the trade unions in the United States, as in every part of the world, are founded on reformist and nationalist politics and have degenerated under conditions of globalized production into corporate bodies defending their national capitalist class and the state against the strivings of the working class. This ever closer integration of the unions with the Biden administration is a conscious response based on their mutual fear of the growing movement of rank and file workers, which threatens to break free from the confines of the corporatist unions and develop into a mass movement against capitalism.
Okay. So Indy posted this in the chat, but what about what happened in Brookline, Massachusetts? So
Yes.
if any of you watched
How do we miss
How
that?
Did We Miss That on Sunday, Indy and Reef reported, an organization effort among Brookline teachers. So Brookline is a suburb outside Boston, Mass. Where essentially, they organized essentially for teachers to get better benefits, essentially. My take then is Brookline is a rich income area.
Mm.
So I think especially for those families in that area, in that town in particular, they have a mutual interest as far as making sure that teachers are getting what they need, because ultimately these are rich kids,
Yeah.
My issue with, so I think as far as, how they organized, that could be something worthwhile exploring a little bit more, honestly, in
It
the way
was
that
New
they
York
did it. I
MAGA
thought-
trays, by the way.
I think in the way that they kind of organized to get, the demands that they wanted, I think was excellent. My critique on that is because this was a rich neighborhood, I can almost say they could afford to do that.
Yeah.
My thing would be like, how would that translate to, let's say, Boston, which is right next door, which is a more diverse area, but I think also includes low income. That is kind of where, it kind of falls flat for me, because it's not to say that the organization efforts is not there, but then I think it's the idea, in thinking of it as a class thing,
Yeah.
like I think we can kind of see this, I think, especially in the media space, especially with larger, personalities, like they talk about, like, oh, like we need Medicare for all and all this kind of stuff. They like talking about the ideas in theory, outside of class. But when we mention class, and I think especially for a lot of these bigger personalities who are generally college educated, who are more in the professional management class, when we talk about class struggle, that will affect them. Like essentially, like people in the working class would be attacking them, because they are the people that, for the most part, do benefit from the capitalist system, even though they kind of say, oh, we believe in this or that and the other. So you notice that how, like, especially for these larger channels, they never talk about the class war at all. So in relation to that, I can kind of see that as far as, certain districts or certain towns. Like I think it's good to talk about a lot of these things, I think for, especially if you're more privileged, like it's nice to talk about, educational equity and all that kind of stuff. But when you're talking about it in terms of class, especially those who are, more have more influence, or like they might feel that, oh, we're going to lose some shit if like lower income people may need something else. So I think that's kind of where
that like pie wedge mentality.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of the problem, in this. I think that's kind of the issue as far as organizing, because it's the idea of like, if we're talking about organizing, you have to talk about meeting people where they're at across class lines. So, which again, if you're in a position of privilege, you might be losing something in order to level the boats, so to speak, in the ocean, so to speak, which certain people may not necessarily want. They might say, oh, we like, again, I use Medicare for all. Oh, we like Medicare for all in theory and all that kind of stuff. Okay, let's organize for it. No, because, I think especially if you're talking about Medicare for all, it could mean they have to pay more taxes in order for that to happen. Like,
God forbid.
When you're talking about education equity, there has to be like something that, the upper class has to give up. Maybe, I don't know, like, I haven't necessarily thought about this, but that's kind of the attitude that, a lot of these people on the left, but if they're privileged, tend to think that they may not necessarily say out loud.
Gotcha.
So,
and to kind of like defend your point before, Collin, like earlier in the show, about like why we have like a particular like organizing problem within this country. We seem to have like sort of branded anti-capitalism in this like very unique way, where it's okay to mention some things, but it's not okay to mention other things, especially when you talk about like dividing amongst class lines and class war.
Right.
I don't think you like necessarily see that in other countries.
No,
Yeah.
but I think you don't see that in other countries, because either like, especially in places in the global south, they're just so poor that it's just like, well, we'll just fuck shit up because we don't have anything anyway. Or like in certain cases in Europe, they have a lot of socialist programs already in place already. So they can be like, I don't care about, like, I still have insurance, I still have time off, like, let's burn shit up. We don't have that, unfortunately, in this country. So those are the systems that like people hold over you in terms of like, oh, like, you're going to protest something? Fine. We'll close down your employment, which has been happening, especially like with Starbucks.
I mean, they've been weaponizing capitalism to the point of like, well, we'll just fire you or move, outsource that work or whatever, which, has been put in place by like, it seems like a lot of these orders are getting thrown from up a little higher than just our political things. Right. If you've been listening to your friends who make those fancy shiny hats, which you should do sometimes, I wanted to call attention to coping mechanisms and rebranding of the New World Order. Y'all have heard of the New World Order, yes? Just want to say New World Order as many times as I can.
New World Order.
Make sure this video gets pulled down so that you can't find it. We actually don't want you to see this. But this is from the Off Guardian. John Frame, which is a fancy name. But he wanted to showcase a little bit of like the psychology of this New World Order and how like an entire mass of people are coping with it. And it's very similar to how your story kind of talked about it, Crap. So he brings up Brandon Smith. All of these arguments are a coping mechanism for the public to deal with evidence they cannot otherwise refute, right? So he's citing an article, which we'll get to. Denial and disbelief to the earth-shattering events of the past 2 years might largely be a psychological coping mechanism for many people rather than an expression of political views or attitudes. but any psychology behind events of the past few years is the last thing the powers that be want people to think about. As a result, the absence of a psychological perspective on world events is stunning. The article, What is the Council for Inclusive Capitalism, and he cites a link, which we'll watch a thing in a second, by Brandon Smith, confronts this psychology as a coping mechanism of denial, protecting the edifice of an accepted belief system. So, and I think this was like on some like alt economic website. So he did talk about how like they're wanting secretly communism. Not John Frame, but this Brandon Smith. He's just missed the mark. It's actually still capitalism. That's why they say capitalism on it. Just it's inclusive now. They literally rebranded it inclusive capitalism. So you're probably wondering why I'm saying that an ism as an actual organization. It's because it is an organization. And here they are with the Vatican. Well, why are they with the Vatican, you might ask?
È necessario urgente un sistema economico giusto, affidabile e in grado di rispondere alle sfide più radicali che l'umanità e il pianeta si trovano ad affrontare.
We are answering Pope Francis's challenge to create more inclusive economies that spread the benefits of capitalism.
Inclusive capitalism. What is that?
Inclusive capital. I would love to know, Collin, what inclusive capitalism is. What do you think inclusive capitalism is? Is that an oxymoron? Like,
is it?
I feel like it has to be.
I feel, but my brain just hearing those like, I don't know. Like, my brain is like, this does not
broke
make
at that
sense,
sentence. Did you notice who it was from? Like, look who's here.
Because really, the Vatican silently supported the Holocaust.
Yes.
In the 50s. So.
Yes. Among many a terrible thing the entire religion of Catholicism has done, let alone just the Vatican, you know?
Vatican loves Nazis.
Feel free to look up the Kids Crusade, you know?
Okay, I actually have to look this up now.
Okay, I'll let the video play a little bit.
To create more inclusive economies that spread the benefits of capitalism more equitably and allow individuals to realize their full potential.
Pause. Capitalism has lifted billions out of poverty, it says.
Billions!
Billions.
I wonder.
A majority of people around the world say that they think their families.
Global chairman and CEO of EY, Carmen DeCibio. I'm sure he's a good dude.
He seems like he has good intentions.
Yeah.
I trust him. I trust this guy.
Years. That's a scenario.
He doesn't wear a tie, so he can't be,
Too much wealth.
Ford Foundation president.
Too few people.
If you make money, what's the point if you're not prepared to share it? If the people who help make that wealth for you can't live with dignity.
It's inclusive capitalism, though, and we have to recognize that starting from where we are to where we need to get to, we need to bring everyone along, and there will be adjustments that come with that.
We do need the private sector's ingenuity,
right.
capital, technology,
yeah,
their passion.
Yeah, Collin got
that's
it.
What I'm saying. That's why that's kind of like my if you want inclusive capitalism, like a roundabout way of saying socialism.
Communism, yeah, like yep.
Well, I mean, you could see Fox News, and I mean, a lot of the right, like conservatives, kind of like hijacked the disasters of capitalism and then just rebranded it as communism. Like I know plenty of boomers who will say like, oh, this is what's happening right now is pure communism.
Yeah.
When clearly we still live in the same system that we have since the 19
Right. It's like you look at, yes, and who's telling you this? All the capitalists. Good. Glad we're good. Like, literally, this video is ridiculous.
Come to the party.
We want to operate in a sustainable way.
This could be a
where
parody
incentives
video.
are aligned across
It is.
generations, not just
It
across
is.
borders.
It's just a straight up
and the
parody.
main actors take a long-term perspective.
Aligning our innovation with the UN
Oh,
Sustainable
yes.
Development
DuPont.
and the priorities.
Yeah, DuPont's never fucked up before.
Both a business and sustainability.
Created napalm.
Two reasons I think why I'd say concrete commitments.
BP! Fucking BP!
Not to be underestimated. Really,
Oh.
is they can inspire.
I'm gonna throw out a couple book recommendations. Chris Hedges has a good word on like.
Do you
hijacking
anyone remember Elon Musk meeting with the Pope not that long ago too?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that had to be like you just across the room. There was like a camera, and then Musk turns in. He's like, "Well, what we need is inclusive capitalism."
Public commitments is they can help build trust.
Leaders in the business community can be a unifying force. They can be a source of opportunity. They can be a source of understanding. So
I
we
love
as
Merrick.
business
I love-
leaders
it's
can
like-
fucking do
step
it.
up and solve many of
Then
these
do it.
economic problems.
I think business plays a very important role in resolving these challenges. I think businesses have to become, part of the solution through leadership by example and through leadership by incentives.
But we're not going.
Vision and purpose.
We are stewards of this.
Oh yeah, Rothschild.
Our duty.
Gotta have. This is the second time she's gotten two things in this.
For future generations.
Double feature of Rothschild.
What an act! These people are some great actors.
Yes, a cardinal of the church. Woo! He totally hasn't overlooked some terrible stuff.
Or the ethical or just social guidance. So that this group that has taken up such a noble task.
Dingo says
of
this
making
video should at least
capitalism
come with a
work
reach
for the good
around.
of humanity, achieve its goal, and land on target. So this is our vision. This is our purpose.
Look, the fact that different religions need to come together on all matters is just the crying need of the times in our world. Faith cannot be used to pull us apart. Faith is meant to bring us together. And the fact that I'm a...
When has it ever?
Ronald Reagan is laughing in his grave right now. He's having a time of his life.
Sikh and somebody else is a different religion, to me doesn't matter.
Our work is indeed about social justice, which is rooted.
Sure, yeah, the Ford Foundation, yeah.
Person deserves to live in a just society.
Capitalism is at the heart of innovation that creates higher standard of living.
Oh,
we know
God.
that can work, yet we also know it can do a lot better.
We need a new system focused
OECD.
on the well-being of people. It's a big challenge, but if it is done right, the benefits will be immense.
Speaking of the Holocaust,
It's not just an asset
Hitler
owner,
had
it's
a
not
picture
just
of
an
Henry
asset
Ford in his
manager,
office.
It's not just a CEO.
Yeah.
It's not just these boards
Yeah,
of
big fan.
directors. We have to work collectively over the
I
long
think
term.
Ford Foundation is, yeah.
How else did they build those all that military equipment?
What
It was
I
Ford.
think capitalism has to stand for to be inclusive capital.
Bank of America.
Everybody have equal
Yes!
access to the opportunity.
We're getting all the big players.
Mobility.
The council is a terrific body.
This is the fucking,
assemble
the capitalist
critical mass of
Avengers.
companies to join and commit to concrete
Like-
actions that not only affect and improve the communities in which we live, but affect the world community of which we're all a part of.
We believe we need more than 1,000 organizations on board, and only with this very purposeful collective action, we will see the systemic change across markets that will make capitalism truly inclusive.
We invite all businesses, large and small, and individuals to join us as stewards
This
for
is the
inclusive
woman we
capitalism by going to our website, agreeing the principles, and making your own commitments to inclusive capitalism.
Yeah.
Please join us.
Make sure to tweet
so what's
and
the capitalism
Instagram.
that we have right now?
It's not inclusive, right?
It's not inclusive.
So we have a
not
so we have
inclusive,
non-inclusive capitalism right now. Like, what's
Apparently,
the
we
difference?
just need to make capitalism inclusive, and that will solve
What the
all of our
fuck? What the fuck does that mean? What the
Alright.
fuck is
I
inclusive?
wish I could tell you.
I pulled up their website.
Yes.
This is their,
I
guess, vision statement or whatever. Or
pop that in the chat somewhere, and I can.
Okay.
I can get it. Like somewhere, but yeah, like what? We had the lineup on that was incredible. By the way, we had like the Bank of America CEO, Ford Foundation CEO, Rothschilds,
yeah.
like the OECD,
The whole crew got together for this.
MasterCard,
They called each other up. They were like, "Hey guys, let's do inclusive capitalism."
Also, let's look at how inclusive that capitalism was. I saw a lot of pale skin pigments. I don't know about you. You know,
I noticed that, but
there was definitely a couple.
I didn't see anyone that looked working class to me.
No, other than in the B-roll, they had it in the B-roll, like the stuff they used from Getty Images.
People, you would think they would not include like giant rich bankers in that,
right?
But
you put it in the chat. There we go. I see it.
I mean, if they mean inclusive as far as having more melanin within their network, then they got it.
Like they had a cardinal and like this guy, and like, you know, they got the Asians to represent. You know, they got the what do they call them? Like, what's the new word for it's like child appreciator? What's the PC term for the pedos now? They found one of those, you know.
that's one of the worst parts.
Minor attracted person. That's it.
Yeah, the pedo worship has got to stop. That's really bad.
So
it's getting really bad.
We are a platform for action, a community of learning, and a movement for change. What the fuck?
Oh wait, go back.
We're a movement for change by not changing a single goddamn thing.
So wait, it's
like in here.
Yeah, hold on.
And I do recommend.
In
like,
short, if you go down to the bottom a little bit, down, right there, up in that purple part, up.
Up
More.
here?
No.
More? Okay.
There.
Yes.
This is a gross
In
website.
short, what is inclusive capitalism? In short, business that profitably works for the common good.
Okay.
Their UX designer sucks.
Yes.
These colors are terrible.
I mean, it's colorful, but like this, like
If you go on the top, you can't even see the logo. I mean, this is just whatever.
Inclusive capitalism is fundamentally about creating long-term value for all stakeholders, businesses, investors, employees, customers, governments, and communities, guided by an approach that provides equality for opportunity for all people to preserve prosperity and quality of life, irrespective of social, economic background, gender, ethnicity, religion, or age, equitable outcomes to those who have the same opportunities and sees them in the same way, fairness across generations so that one generation does not realize near-term benefits that incur long-term costs that overburden future generations, fairness in society to those whose circumstances prevent them from full economic participation.
so bullshit on all accounts when in regards to fucking capitalism. Like impossible. But anyway, so I wanted to continue this article a little bit. Although that video was fabulous.
I mean, at minimum, it makes for a good laugh.
Yes.
This is why I want you to read Capitalist Realism by Mark Fisher.
Yeah,
my sister has a professor, and like he talks about this very thing about like us like kind of like adapting capitalism within our culture And so
Yeah.
they just hijack all these different definitions in order to
Right.
kind of like make it seem.
Yeah, it's like
I'm
bootstrap bullshit. And
I'm definitely gonna get the book and I could probably read that within a
It's
couple
a short
of days.
read. It's a really short read. Anyone
Yeah.
watching who's a reader, read Capitalist Realism.
so, as Smith writes, all of these arguments are a coping mechanism for the public to deal with evidence they cannot otherwise refute. When the facts become concrete and the powers that be admit to their schemes openly, some people will revert to confused denial. They don't want to believe their organized evil on such a scale could actually be real. If it did, then everything they thought they knew about the world might be wrong. The article mentions a new control center of globalism in the Council for Inclusive Capitalism that is really a rebranding of the better-known term, the New World Order. When we say that, we're not just saying a new world. No, it was an actual organ. Anyway, and it's agencies like the World Economic Forum, which include who, people? We just saw a few of them. And Rothschild's definitely part of that too. Bill Gates, part of that. Almost like every world leader, including Putin at one point, was part of that, I think.
I think they have our best interests at heart.
Sure.
Actually, I think the World Economic Forum is a force for good in the world.
Yes.
They want all of the working class to rise up and live comfortable, happy lives.
You hear that, YouTube? We're cool.
Yeah.
The new branding uses techniques and words that progressives and socialists are masters at creating. In effect, creating words that suggest the exact opposite of what they really do. For example, here the word capitalism, that long-standing symbol for individualism and freedom, in parentheses, is rebranded by globalists, and the new organization does not just use the word capitalism, but inclusive capitalism. When with the new label,
I don't define capitalism as individualism and freedom. I just define it as fucking people over.
Pain.
Profit.
Not even one time. They never even said what inclusive capitalism is.
No,
They just said,
it's all words.
They just went off on dark.
No,
what the
I
fuck
think
is
no.
inclusive
Crap, I
capitalism?
think I figured it. No, I figured it out. It's like fucking people over, but people that look
In a
like
nice
me
way.
doing it.
Is this like this is like the Jersey Devil inclusive capitalism? It just doesn't really exist, you know. So with the new label, it moves away from using collectivist words like world and order, replacing them with the benign-sounding inclusive capitalism. Apart from, it's like a fucking Austin Powers sketch. It's like so fucking stupid.
It's a parody.
Well, this evil, we'll have to call it something like inclusive capitalism. That way everyone will be happy. Like, you fucking...
Capitalism for everyone. I love this comment.
The people can't be that dumb. Like, but they are, sir. Apart from observing the new
Get a
symbolism,
capitalism.
like suggesting...
Capitalism.
Oh, and she's probably going to show up.
Capitalisms.
That lady's going to show up on one of these for sure at some point. You know, shout out for the reason white girls read Oprah. I heard, I'm stealing that joke, and it's a great joke. People should go find that. Apart from observing the new symbolism suggesting individualism to the globalist grand continued project of collectivism. Jesus, yeah, obviously they needed a rebrand. There's too many big words. One observes the New World Order project has continually changed its name from being called the Multilateral World Order, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and the Great Reset, among others. The changes are meant to find...
those names, they couldn't get away from the conspiracy. Like
yes.
Out of all of them, they couldn't get away from it.
Now it's inclusive capitalism. So...
Right. But you know what? I think it's interesting that they have to rebrand because people are catching on.
Yes.
So like people who are more critically thinking are able to kind of catch the bullshit. So they're like, oh no, like it's not that, it's actually this, which we don't know entirely what that means, but like this is what it really is, and it's going to benefit you as well as the whole world and all this kind of stuff. But
it's going to be great.
But it's still like this.
Build back better, everybody. The changes are meant to find better more benign words for the now as suggested above, but also meant to hide the New World Order from, as Smith notes, a public that grows increasingly wise to the conspiracy. You were saying, Collin?
Right. Yeah.
As Smith observes, the names change, but the meaning is always the same. The article comes from a site off the everyday news grid of two-party politics has put much of the nation in a type of hypnotic state, like watching the back-and-forth ball in an endless tennis match, like watching the back-and-forth swinging of a timepiece on the chain of a hypnotist. Ironically, the article itself creates evidence that, as the authority says, the public reader cannot otherwise refute, and it's too hard for many to believe the new version of a new and improved New World Order in the Council for Inclusive Capitalism continues the agenda of creating a global government. It is not surprising that the mainstream media labels the idea of an agenda for global government a conspiracy theory. In doing so, they provide a handy psychological coping mechanism for living in a strange new world that cannot otherwise be refuted. So, closing thoughts?
I mean, as I said, I think it's, on one hand, this gives me some hope a little bit, only in terms of, like, as I said, I think people are kind of catching on the bullshit, and I think it shows that people are actually doing their research and actually are kind of
keeping up with it.
BS.
Yeah.
Do you think that's the case?
Like,
You really
of
think that's
what
the case, Colin?
this really entails.
I think so. It's like the cat's out of a bag problem, right? Where it's like, as long as you follow the money now, it's like they all got targets on them, so you can just like watch where they go, where do they put their money, who do they hang out with, you know.
Yeah, you can't really put the cat back in.
Yeah, like.
But I think, the idea of like the Great Reset, the New World Order, you know,
Right.
like these kind of like Illuminati-ish type.
Yes.
Phrasing,
Right.
like
There's people who will still like scoff at you over that though.
I think that was on
Like, you're
purpose
still, like, a
too.
large
I think the reason they called those organizations that was because it sounded conspiratorial and whatever. And now it's like
That's
people don't
exactly
care
it.
about that, like, necessarily. Like, as long as it sounds plausible, which it is, right? And you can
As long as
actually
it sounds
point to
pretty
it.
and nice.
Right.
That's all that matters.
I
Well, and
mean,
that-
although thinking about this now, the idea of inclusive capitalism, honestly, in this day and age, kind of makes a lot of sense to me. Only
Yeah.
because, you know, like, as I said, it's as I joke about it, but I think there's actually some truth to it. I think being in this is
Well,
in
and
the because the idea
meanwhile,
of capitalism, when people generally think of capitalism, often than not, you know, me especially thinking as a Black person, you know, like I think of white people
yes.
generally. You
The
know,
people
like,
who hold
I mean,
capital.
in my mind, I think of
Right.
like white people who are rich trying to fuck me over. Now, as I said, inclusive capitalism is the idea of like you could be melanated as hell, and you can
And
still
steal
fuck me
from
over.
all your friends. Yes.
Right.
Yep.
So, but this is happening already. You know, like, I mean, take like, and I'm just going to use, I think probably a more relatable example. You know, like in music, for example. Like, I think in terms of like maybe like hip hop. You know, like I'm saying hip hop because I mean not so much now, but I think it's still kind of known to have a, you know, predominantly Black base, you know, who like buys it, who promotes that music genre, you know, like, and what did now, you know, in this day and age, what did they promote? Capitalism. You know,
Yeah.
So
That's
the
actually
idea of, like,
manufactured, but
these
it's
rich,
manufactured that way by the CIA.
these rich
Yeah.
rappers, many of whom are owned by white people, who are telling me that like, oh, I need to have this car, I need to have this house, I need to have these shoes, I need to have this hat, I need to have all this money in order for me to feel like I'm good, you know? So I mean, we joke about the term, but like,
Well, I mean, I heard recently, like, you know, both Kendrick and Killer Mike, I think, is more just me looking at that. But with like Kendrick, he's openly stated that he wants to move away from talking about the struggle. Right. And like,
I mean, there's going to be, I mean, there's going to be, I think in this day and age, there's going to be like few examples to that. And I think actually, Greg, you've mentioned this, I think personally with me, because I asked you, like, I think some time ago, like, are there any punk musicians who are really punk? And you basically said punk is dead. You
And
know?
there's
Like,
Idols is the only thing I can think even gets close, and it's still like trying to be corporate controlled
really,
anyway.
It's really kind of scary, like the way that, and this is mainly due to the CIA and the culture for refoundation, especially like in the 60s era, where like everything in our culture is meant to serve in the interest of capital.
Yeah.
There's nowhere you can find anywhere. It's like a giant mind experiment. It's trying to figure out what is the best way we can reframe this so that everyone is on board.
Right.
And they basically took over everything. They hijacked everything, including definitions, in order to kind of just benefit this one particular system.
Well, it's that's my, opinion on labels.
Yeah. I was in Barbados a couple of weeks ago, and like with my family, and a lot of people that I was talking to were like, well, you live like in America, and like the idea that what people said to me, I never thought of this in this way, but like people said to me, like people who go to America and the UK, often from the Caribbean islands, often look for better opportunities, as far as better work, better pay and all of that kind of stuff, with the idea of like, oh, you should be able to buy a house, you should be able to have a car, you should be able to, have a good education that you're able to afford or whatever, so the idea is like, if you're going away, you should either have these things, like in, your the countries that you're emigrating to, or like when you come back, you're able to get those things.
Right.
And I thought about that. It's just kind of like, well, in a way, I can kind of understand it because, I think that's a very traditional way of thinking. But that's still tied to capitalism in a lot of ways, though. Like, and so it's like the idea of like, you're finding your worth in things that and I think depending how you use them may not always be for the betterment, of others around you. It could, and I think especially like in America, because it's so individualistic, often than not is used in the idea of like, look what I have, look what I was able to do for myself, and fuck the rest of y'all, because I worked hard for this shit. And so like, if you're going to work hard, if you can do the same thing, that pull yourself by the bootstraps mentality type thing. So why I feel like in certain ways, I think it's not necessarily wrong way of thinking, not necessarily, but I think we definitely have to be careful in terms of like how even the term inclusive capitalism is construed to the idea of like, it's just that. It's just like, if you work hard and like, do what you need to do, anybody can be elevated into like basically in the secret club. That's what I'm calling it. And you can like reach your dreams when the reality is most of us are not going to able to meet the status of any of the people that we watch in the video. Most of us will never get there. I'll probably say pretty much all of us will never get there. And then the idea that people are not necessarily saying is like, in order for you to get that rich, you have to do something to the detriment of workers beneath you. So the question is, what did they do? Not necessarily them, but like, especially if they are old money, what did their ancestors do that hindered the wealth of others?
Well, and Steinbeck once wrote, because he couldn't use the C word, he had to use this other word. Socialism never took root in America because the poor see themselves not as an exploited proletariat, but as temporarily embarrassed millionaires. Which
that's exactly what it is. I was talking about that before, like how it's really embedded in our culture where we're so hyper individualistic. Everyone is like a pretend millionaire, or at least like in their heads, they're like, oh, that could be me too. And that I feel like that's exclusive to the U.S.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it's exclusive to the US, but I think like because she's definitely I know, Greg, you know, like in Europe that you definitely find that too. But I think the US is a special kind of crazy when it comes to that.
Yeah.
Like I think it's just really hyper focused here to the point where it's actually like an ideology. Like, and to kind of not necessarily buy into that, people are like, what's wrong with you?
Well, it's your
Like,
worth
I
is
will
based
say-
off how much you can consume, you know,
The
like,
American dream is probably the fattest lie ever told.
yes.
Oh, yeah.
Because you have to be asleep to believe it. Thank you, Carlin. Rest in peace.
Yep.
But anyway, speaking of resting, we should probably head out soon so people can do that. We have, hopefully we can schedule some stuff next week. That'll be some big guests. So stay tuned for that. That'll be interesting. If you go down in the description below, you'll see a link that says indienews.network. You'll also see it scrolling down below us on the screen right now. That you go there, you can find all the links to all the members of the network. You can also find the links directly in the description below for both Collin and Greg and myself. Feel free to leave whoever you want some donations. People love getting some money in their banjo case, you know. But yeah, Friday I should be doing a show. Hopefully, I don't know who's going to be on, but we'll figure that out. Anyone doing stuff on Thursdays right now? Do we have something coming up?
I don't think so. No.
Okay. Saturdays, I know Marcus Cage usually streams, and a few other people. Not that he's in the network, but
Monday.
How do we miss that? Monday's Tara. Yeah. We'll eventually create a public calendar for people that we can get some stuff together on that and figure that out.
And then
Tommy Nation, 10 p.m. Is that tomorrow, Indy, or is that Thursday, Tommy Nation, or Saturday? I don't know which one. Hopefully he'll tell me in a second.
It might be Fridays.
Yeah. So, and yeah, just keep an eye out for the INN Twitter. We try to retweet when people are going live. So keep an eye out for that, Greg.
So Friday, 3 p.m. Indy is doing Friends of Indy Left. I believe he's having Franco from Frank Analysis.
Frank Analysis. Oh, fucking Frank. That's gonna be good.
So check his Twitter, and just to remind you all. And just check in regards to next week. We are trying to confirm some really special guests. Hopefully. So stay tuned for that.
Hopefully they're not too big that they can't make it. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, we'll see how that works. But should be a good interview if we can pull that. So, but yeah, Thursday is Tommy Nation, Indy said, and Friends of Indy Left on Friday. But yeah, keep an eye out for that Twitter. Greg, you got anything coming up specifically?
Not in the pipeline right now.
Collin?
I've got music.
You have an album, right?
Yeah, I have 2 EPs out right now. You can find that all on my linktree. It's all popped up on the top there.
Nice.
But I'm making creative stuff intermittently in the time.
Cool. Collin, you got anything coming up?
I hope to have an episode, an interview up on my channel before this time next week, and I am working on another interview. Probably, definitely in August, it should premiere. So.
And you said you had something coming up this weekend, right? That like you were going out.
Oh yeah, so March for America for All. For
yeah.
you who are around.
And Camp Data, guys.
Yeah, that too.
Well, Camp Data.
If you're able to give money to Tech Sisters, we had them on, I think 3 weeks ago now.
They're stressed the fuck out. They really could use support.
As always with organizing, turns out super energy.
Hard, guys.
It's so difficult.
It's a fucking toll on your body, soul, and mind. Support your organizers, like you're legit organizers.
Mm-hmm. So
mobilization is temporary, organization is eternal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's who's that quote?
Kwame Ture.
That's it.
Well, something like, I'm paraphrasing what he said, but that's essentially what he said, you know.
Well, but yeah, no. What was that? Inclusive capitalism? Fucking labels. Yeah. You know how I feel about those.
Oh, that's what it is. Okay.
You know, labels are bad. Stay independent, as always. Good night, everyone.
Good night, guys. Thank you.
Good night.
We're out.